Hello, good evening. Welcome to episode 3 of my occasional series, Behind the Screens, where I talk about things related to role-playing gaming, but not actually the playing of role-playing games. So it's all things role-playing and role-playing allied. I want to thank you for your time, and I hope you find my ramblings interesting. Please let me know if there's something you're especially interested in, and I'll try to roll it into a future episode. You see what I did there? So this time I'm doing the second part of the GM's back pocket, looking at how to control the rhythm of the game and make the best use of the things from part 1. I'm going to talk about text adventures and to Puk Itotu. This is not a monster from the Cthulhu mythos. No, it's an acronym that I made up. I'm going to do part 2 of the role-playing games storytelling series, covering how to structure a scene and the way to provide suitable challenges for a party within a module or an adventure. And I'm going to finish up by showing you a tool called Deep Night RPG Map, a piece of software that I use to help me look far better at this stuff than I have any right to look. See, I really am giving away any secrets that I have. The priceless ones and the worthless ones. So take of them what you will. We can be followed on Twitter at Boys Baltic for regular updates on what we're doing for the whole stream. So, without further ado, let's begin at the beginning. The GM's Back Pocket Part 2. Last time I covered 3 things a GM needs in order to be comfortable going with the flow as players explore an environment. So this time I'm going to cover the other really important components of coping with the flexibility your players should have every right to expect. The first one is all about your comfort as the GM, and I call it the pause button. Even the most experienced GM will, from time to time, find themselves needing to, how to put it, you lose track of something important, or you, for gameplay reasons, suddenly need to slow something down. In my case, I might need, for example, to delay the party from heading off on a journey because I know it's almost immediately going to turn into an insanely complicated combat or role-playing session. And I don't want to kick that off in the last 20 minutes, half an hour of a session. So anytime you need to just slow things down a bit, you need a pause button. So, for example, you can create a scenario that is actually an event. In D&D, these things are sometimes called wandering monsters. You give them a bugbear to fight for 20 minutes. I bet you also know what a mollymawk is. You know, if you know what a bugbear is. No? Wandering mugger? Wandering florist? Wandering albatross? That's the mollymawk connection. Anyway, pause buttons are very useful. What makes them a pause button is there's no likelihood that the encounter will spin off into other things. They have to be self-contained. A clever GM can easily make an encounter like this last between 10 and 30 minutes as needed. Need it longer, you add in a bit of a chase, perhaps. Need it shorter, make the wandering florist run away. You get the point. So, isn't this a form of railroading? Are you kind of forcing people to do what you want? Not in my opinion. It's time management. It's not really part of the plot of the game. It's an intermission. It's an intermission filled with violence or floristry, or both. Because it's going to be over quickly and drop the characters back where they were, you're not pushing them to do anything. You're not forcing them down any particular route in role-playing terms. You're just giving them something to occupy their time when you need to slow the game down a bit. You can use it to catch a bit of your breath, to think out quietly how you're going to cope with a problem that you've now realised your story has. Or, as I say, just to pad out a portion of a session. It's possible it may turn into a bit of a role-playing. I mean, maybe one of your characters has a deathly fear of florists and just flees the encounter. And that's fine too. And remember, running away can take just as long as fighting, so it's not as if that's going to interfere with your schedule. So you keep a few of these in your back pocket, enough variety, and so that they don't all seem the same, and it will allow you to manage the game a little more effectively. It also allows you to affect the rhythm of the game a little. If you've spent the last 2 hours shopping, then give them something more active to stretch the muscles a little. Of course, that does depend on your crew. Your particular group of players might be entirely happy to go shopping for hours and hours, or they might think it's the most dull thing in the universe and they really want to get some action under their feet. It's fine. Either way, it's your crew, it's your game, but it's worth having a few of these in your mind just so that you can throw something at them. So what kind of things would they be? Because even though I've used the example of a wandering monster, or florist, remember, role-playing is just as good a pause button. You can write a little character that they can meet at any time. Give him or her a little story to tell, or a bit of trivia to impart. Your mileage may vary, but you know your players, so you know what will give them an amusing little diversion. It really is that simple. Depending on your party, or the tone of the game, the party might literally walk past a storyteller on the street corner, in a pub, and listen to a tale. They might see someone get injured in front of them and decide to offer aid, or steal the poor unfortunate's stuff. You can throw a ticket tout, a hawker for a bar or a club, a purveyor of street food, or a gang of people betting on a game of chance. Anything you like can be dropped into these as a little role-playing moment and can buy you a little bit of time. It can pad your adventure when you really need to stretch it just a little bit. And it can be very handy. This is particularly useful, obviously, in a longer game, in a campaign. When you're doing a one-shot, you normally need to accelerate things. And coming to that, accelerating things, the next little trick is the accelerator button. Sometimes, for all sorts of different reasons, your party will decide to exhaustively examine every tiny detail of something that is completely irrelevant to your plot. They don't know that. They don't know it at all. But they will sometimes get distracted. Now, there are different ways to deal with this, but one is the golden herring, and one is the shiny thing. The golden herring is something they can find that rewards them for their diligence, but is fundamentally just to stop them looking. Once a party becomes convinced there has to be something valuable in the old farmhouse, they will tear it apart brick by brick, looking for that thing. In an RPG world, looking should lead to finding. And this is key, as long as they make the right roll. So make them make a roll to search the entire area, for example. So don't actually let them role play every single brick and every single component of their search. Group it together, make them make one roll for the whole area. And then you can, very sadly shake your head and say, oh, Nothing catches their attention, and they'll know they made a bad roll. So here's the thing. What happens if they roll a great result? You have to be prepared for this, right? They might roll a roll so good that they know they've got to find something. After all, you allowed them to roll. Enter the golden herring. If they actually do roll that well, then give them something. The exact details will vary, but let them have a little something that's useful or plot relevant. It could be a letter, a coin, a weapon, or a marking on a wall. It could be anything at all. If you do it well, there's a good chance it will be seen as natural progression. But even if they catch you doing it, an experienced GM will be able to convey to the party that all you're doing is trying to avoid spending the next 3 game sessions reading every book in the municipal library or turning over every rock in a garden. Players ultimately will forgive you for these little tricks. Sometimes, however, the golden herring is not suitable. The clear alternative is the shiny thing. The shiny thing generally takes one of 3 forms, but they all do the same thing. While your party is fruitlessly doing whatever busy work they've managed to obsess over, give them something shiny to spot. A glint of something from the building on the hill, for example. Now, that's the type of example that gives the shiny thing its name, but it doesn't have to be in that form. It could be a sound, it could be a feeling, you name it. But there are 2 other types of shiny things. Well, sort of. If you have one available, you can let a shiny NPC pass on a clue. This is still a shiny thing because it redirects attention away from the current activity to the next thing of real interest. Never make your players follow your plot, but always try to make them aware of their next options and opportunities. There's one more type of shiny thing. It's the shiny clock. Hurry the pace by supplying a sort of deadline, and the alert party will throw themselves into the pursuit with more haste. Want them to hurry to face the vampire? Suggest it's turning late afternoon. They're wasting time before going on an urgent quest? Give them a rival group of adventurers who are after the same thing and must be beaten to the prize. The best of all these accelerators is the shiny golden herring. Yes, indeed. The shiny golden herring. It's possible to provide both a satisfactory reason to believe they've found all they can and a new thing to follow at the same time. What is this witchcraft? It's called evidence of activity. Footprints are found leading away towards the castle on the hill. Why the castle on the hill? Because that's the place you actually wanted them to examine in detail. You've given the party some evidence of activity. Nothing more than a clue, but the clue is itself a golden herring, something they can learn by rolling a skill check, and then where it leads, well, that's the shiny thing. So now you've given them something they found, and you've given them a shiny thing to follow. At the same time. It is the rarest of perfect GM's tools. But when deployed correctly, the shiny golden herring makes the players feel like gods. They found the footprints, they understood their meaning, and now they can press on towards this objective that, without their brilliance and a superb roll, would have been impossible to discern. They are the greatest players in all of human history, and lesser players will bow down before them. Smile and nod. Smile and nod. Don't be tempted to tell them. The final thing to talk about in this session is modularity. To an extent I've already covered it. It's been a running theme throughout, but mostly in part 1. Wherever possible, when doing preparation, split the content you need into components that can be assembled on the fly as needed. It's what I talked about with NPC names, for example. You had a name but not a role for that NPC. So imagine you have the need for an encounter, because the players have wandered off the beaten path and are now expecting to find something out there. You might have a few things prepared, such as locations, part 1, some NPC names, a shiny thing or two, and if you find it helpful in your game system, a generated set of basic statistics for NPCs. When I say you have these prepared, I mean you have a few of each. Now, you had no idea what sort of quest might suit the moment when your party goes off into the unknown, but it really doesn't matter. You have an NPC name you can use to indicate the quest, initiate the encounter, or you can easily turn the shiny thing into a shiny golden herring for them to follow. You have an NPC name for the enemy at the end, if it requires one. You dig out the prepared mine workings that you've been sitting on, and when the battle comes, you select an appropriate stat block for the enemy from your prepared ones. The components are completely interchangeable, but they are relevant. You've chosen names that sound like they come from your campaign area, stats that suit the capabilities of the party, shiny things that are worth having, but not too powerful. And then you just pick the location that suits the environment they wandered off into. It's a completely modular approach, and it allows you to look like your world is much more richly textured and vastly bigger than the one you actually created. I know I've covered a lot of stuff here, so next time I'm going to work through a few examples of how to put it all together, and I hope you'll find that interesting. But